that thing now.
Welcome back to our show. My name is Todd Ewing, and the name of our show is See the Heaven in Every Black Face. It's See the Heaven in Every Black Face. Transform ourselves, transform our communities, claim our nobility. Again, I remind folks I try to see the heaven in every face, but it's important in this day for our community for us to learn to see the heaven in every black face. And so this show is about that. The title is taken from my book, Seeing Heaven in the Face of Black Men. If you're interested in hearing more about that and get my book or hear more about what the book is about, please go to my website. It's heaveninthefaceofblackmen.com. That's heaveninthefaceofblackmen.com. So what is this show about? It's about the need for us to transform the way we see ourselves and the way we see each other, seeing the heaven, nobility and dignity in ourselves, so we begin to interact, communicate, and treat each other with nobility and dignity. We want to be acting and not reacting. Choosing our responses based on our nobility is a healthy place to be. Now, before I get into this show, I see an announcement before me, and I better do this now so I don't forget. There's a fall concert coming up here, September 24th, 10 to 1 a.m. Cover charge $20 at the door. Band called Seven. There's a cash bar Saturday, September 24th. That's also the opening of the African American Cultural and History Museum. But anyway, the doors will open at 9 p.m. And it'll be streaming live on Ustream. So pay attention for that, September 24th, 10 to 1 o'clock. So this show that we're talking about, I got a message here. Is this... Okay. Sorry about this. My guest, I have to send him a note. Okay, so here's where we are. This show, I've always said there's not enough good news. There's not enough good news that we share, especially involving race. And although this program is not just a racial story, most certainly because of race, literally a life-saving opportunity may have been missed. So this program involves an African-American woman. She was a guest on our show before, Miss Barbara Talley, whose husband Gil had a serious and major stroke, a life-threatening stroke. Barbara was determined to learn everything she could about natural methods of healing and drug prescriptions that may be dangerous for her husband. She wanted him to stay away from those, even though they might have been prescribed. She also went on Facebook requesting a prayer chain that people would say prayers for her husband and her family daily. In short, she committed herself to saving her husband Gil's life. And meanwhile, as this was going on, as she made this prayer request, a gentleman, a white man, Dr. George Lord, who's in the healing profession, which he'll share a little bit about when he comes on, he never met Barbara, but he saw this request online, and he was touched by it. And he thought he wanted to share his healing practices with Barbara for her consideration. So he contacted her in the midst of her heart-rending efforts. And so we're going to share this story. It's a touching story. It's a love story. It's an instructive story. We're going to share this story about what took place for Barbara and her husband, and we're going to learn a little bit about Dr. George Lord's holistic practices. So hopefully Barbara will be calling in any second now. And as she calls in, she's calling my cell phone for some reason. Is that phone hooked up? Hello? Whoop. Can you call in on the number? Not my cell phone, the number that I sent you. She'll call right back. No, I sent you a number yesterday. Okay, bye-bye. Let me give it to you. You got it? You ready? 240-455-5934. Yep. Okay. Bye-bye. Okay, so she's going to call in. There was just a little miscommunication. She thought she was going to call in on my cell phone. So she'll call in on this number, and we will be good to go. So anyway, while she's calling in, I want to introduce her. Again, her name is Barbara Talley. She's been a dear friend for a long time. She's been a guest before. She came on the show a couple weeks ago, and she talked about really how do we stay positive in a negative environment. And she was talking about how as black people we can deal with the racial challenges that we have and try and stay positive. But anyway, she's also a writer. She's a poet. She's a diversity trainer, a motivational speaker. Most recently, she started doing training on what was called appreciative inquiry. She's a mother of 6 and a wife. And also, the last time I introduced her, I forgot to say that she won a prestigious award and honor several years ago as Mother of the Year. And we don't have time to talk about that now, but it's a very prestigious award as Mother of the Year. But she's here not in any of those roles except for really as a wife who really decided she wanted to take the care of her husband's health into her own hands. And so we want to hear her story and then how Dr. George Lord played in terms of his decision to contact her and offer his healing practices. So Barbara, welcome.
Hi, Todd.
How you doing?
How are you? I'm fine.
Good. You heard the introduction, I hope.
Yeah.
The last time I forgot to say that you were the Mother of the Year that year, and I think that's a beautiful thing. I'm sorry I missed it the last time you were on the show.
Oh, that doesn't,
No, that was important. That was a very, very distinguished
Well, mom work is probably the most important work.
It is the most important
when we think
work.
about it, yeah.
Yeah, and I always ask every guest, and I'm not going to ask you because I asked you the last time, and I think you answered it so well. I always ask every guest to talk about, what it means to them to see the heaven in every black face, and you answered that question last time. Unless you want to answer it again, I want to really get straight to the story of you and your husband and what you did to help his healing. So would you rather do that, or would you rather answer the question?
Whatever you want. I can do that very briefly.
We'll do that then.
Well, when you see, I guess it may sound like the Black Lives Matter kind of a spiel, in that our media, that's why it's so important what you're doing now, our media hasn't painted the black man as heavenly. Mm-hmm. And so we really need to do some affirmative work, just like in organizations when there was a concerted effort to keep people behind and not letting them start the race of life or opportunities at the same time. So at some point in life, they said, I used to have this phrase I used to think about when I was struggling, and it says, he who starts last in a race must run faster or forever remain behind.
That's right.
So that's why I became the Superwoman, because if you start last in a race, you're held back. How are you going to ever catch up unless you run faster? But you see, we run out of energy. We're not the Energizer bunnies, and so we get into these roles where we end up running so fast, that we start missing life. And so seeing the heaven, the black men have had to do that too, as well as black women.
That's right.
And we have to catch up in life because of all of what the media has shown us to be. I tell people, I said, the day before slavery, when they had us on the block, they said, hey, look at, Mamie. Mamie's strong. She's hardworking. She's smart. She's brilliant. Look at Job. He's this. He's strong. He's loyal. He's that. The day after slavery, when people weren't making money off of us, he's lazy, good for nothing, do all this stuff. So, and that stuff has prevailed.
Yeah, it's pervasive.
Into today, and we have to fight every day from those negative images that depict us wrong. Mm-hmm. So when you say seeing heaven in the face of a black man,
and a black woman,
and a black woman, we're retraining our brains that says if we're all spirit, if God has created us all from the same dust so that none of us will exalt ourselves above the other, if we really believe in that, then we have to be able to look at the face of a starving black child or a starving black or Hispanic or any person and say, wait a minute, my heart needs to ache just as bad as if I saw somebody that looked like me if I were white. And so when we start seeing heaven in the face of every black child, every person, then I think then we can truly all say that we follow a God, because that's what God wants us, is for his people to be in unity, to love, take care of the least among us. There's all kinds of, no matter what your religion is, there's some phrase in there that says, when you see somebody hungry and tired, look at me and feed them in my name.
Right.
And we kind of gotten away from that. And so now we have to have slogans like Black Lives Matter because we weren't included. We weren't included in the dialogue, and we definitely are not included in the media message that shows us as heavenly How many shows do you see showing the best qualities of the black man?
Yeah, good point.
You don't. They're far and few between. You can be a murderer, you can be a drug pusher, you can be all of these kinds of things. And I think of some of the new shows that I've seen out there now are demonizing the black woman the same way. They're showing her as the president's whore,
I know,
or whatever. That's a whole new talk.
It is, but
don't get me
real.
started, Todd. You knew better than that.
But you know what, Barbara? I was going to part of this show. Originally, one of the shows I was going to do, and hopefully I'll do it in the future. It's about the media and the representations in the media. But I was looking up the new shows and the new shows that have black women, and I was looking at it's wonderful that there's more black women in starring roles.
But look at the roles we're playing.
But then look at the roles we're playing.
Right. We'll lie to get anything, or we'll kill anybody, or we do whatever, just as long as ours gets taken care of. And I don't think that's really the story of the black woman.
No, it's
I think she's always been long suffering, and she's always been there saving everybody. In fact, she doesn't save herself. And taking care of everybody and putting her needs, last. So I don't think it's a very fair depiction of the black woman to give us status in the media, but do it in such a way where they point out, the vices.
The lowest common denominator.
The lowest common denominator. Yeah. And then we look up to those people because great actresses and actors, and we want to support them, but at the same time, we're poisoning our minds with negative messages that don't do us justice.
Exactly. Well, Barbara, we could go down this road, and so I'm
going to you knew not to open that gate.
I did. And I'm going to have you back on another time, that. But, the story of you and your husband, and when he had a major, severe stroke, it was very touching. I called it, a touching story, a love story, but a very instructive story. And so what I wanted you to do is just kind of share what happened and kind of how you really took charge of the situation, and then just leading up to the point where Dr. George Lord came into the picture, and then he's going to call in after you hang up and just kind of share where he picked up. But whatever part of that story you want to share, so the audience gets a sense really of how serious this was and what you went through to.
Yeah, I'd be happy. I'm actually honored to be able to give back to someone who has obviously gave me so much. And then there are people say, well, how do you know? How do you know anything? I know he's better. Right. They said you will know them by their fruits. But I had spoken I hadn't spoken to him initially. But back in May, we as Facebook friends, he had mentioned to me about reading a book, Dress to Kill, and he was saying how I should read that.
Now, who's the he you're talking about now?
George Lord.
Okay.
George was talking about this, so we were just doing Facebook stuff, and it was about things that women ought to know. And you might want to ask George about that, Dress to Kill. Okay. He said it was not a novel, but he said look into that. And he talked about lymphatic therapy can help women, look. So anyway, he talked about that, and I said, wow, that's kind of interesting. And so we just kind of started a little thing. I asked him about what he did. He told me about acupuncture meridians and all that kind of stuff. I kind of knew some stuff about it, and he talked about how it had to do with mood regulation, and then that was back in May, and we said, hey, we need to have a chat, which didn't happen because, you know how it is, my life got kind of crazy, and so we didn't. But in October 21st, 2015, I was out of town, and I got a call from my daughter, and she says, Dad said, you need to come right back. And when I got back, immediately when that happened, I knew, they said it's really bad. So I didn't know exactly what was going on. I first thought it was food poisoning because they said he was throwing up and all this. And, then I had to, of course, get on the plane. There was no way to contact me because I'm in California. But before I even got on there, I put a message out on Facebook, and I just said, Dear friends, I want 1,000 prayers for my husband, Gil. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that my prayer mingled with 1,000 other prayers. Whatever needed to happen would happen. And so people started praying all over the world. I mean, literally all over the world. One of the most touching experiences was this picture that someone posted of these 3 or 4 little white boys, and they were having a birthday party at some surf shop. And they sent a picture, and they said, we stopped our party to say prayers for your husband. Wow. So when people ask me, how did you stay so strong? It was because of people out there, everybody that didn't even know what was going on, because in the beginning, I didn't know how serious it was. I didn't know. I just knew I needed to get home, and I needed people to be praying for me till I got back. But little stories like that. And then, of course, there was an email. On Facebook, there was a message from George, and I just pulled it up, and it says, Dear Barbara, here's what I did. So he'd already done it. You know, he said, here's Barbara, here's what I did. It seemed that the hemorrhage was on the right. It was of course complicated and very dangerous. Now, mind you, when I get off the airplane and I rush to the hospital, they tell me your husband has had a 6.6 centimeter hemorrhagic stroke. I don't even know the difference between hemorrhagic and ischemic strokes at that point. I became very educated on strokes after that, of course. But basically a hemorrhagic stroke is a brain attack. That means that the blood vessel or vein bursts in your head, and that brain fills with blood. Now, if something happened to your knee or your arm and a blood vessel broke, you would just get a big lump or swelling, and it would eventually go down because the skin is expandable. But the brain has the skull, so it's not expandable. So that means if it's in there, you can go into a concussion. Either the brain has to reabsorb the blood, or you have to drill in it to give it a space for the blood to go. All very, very, very serious stuff. So when I arrived at the hospital, the doctor said, "Let me tell you, your husband is very, very sick." He said, "Normally someone with a bleed of this size would be in a coma, and you'd be hoping they'd come out, and they never would be the same." That's what he greeted me with. Wow. And he showed me this massive, said, "This is the brain, and all of this is all this blood. And we'll have to wait and see if the brain's going to try to do it itself or if we have to intervene. But, he wanted to let me know this is very serious." Meanwhile, so this is about 3 days later. That happened on October 21st, and I'm in the hospital, asking for prayers, praying, reading up to find out what the heck is happening. And I get this email from George, which I'll read. It says, "Dear Barbara, here's what I did." This is on October 21st, 12:39 a.m. It says, "It seemed that the hemorrhage was on the right." Now, mind you, I hadn't even talked to him at this point. It was, of course, complicated and very dangerous, but I tried to create a sort of shield to protect the brain, decrease arterial pressure there, increase the uptake by venous sinuses, veins, CSF, and lymphatics, allow that side of the skull to bow out a little bit temporarily to reduce the intracranial pressure, urge the parts of the blood responsible for clotting to generally not to be too quick to do their work while the excess blood could be cleared, repair the tear in the artery, have the extra vasated blood which had been recaptured to be taken to the lymph nodes, spleen and liver for recycling, and put the bone marrow on notice that it would need to replace the blood as soon as appropriate. At some point, it was conceded that God was the one who would maintain all these things in the right quantities, speeds, timing, etc. But often a little specific information can help the body get past some of its confusion, wondering which fire to put out first. To me, it was looking seriously chaotic, but it seems a lot less so. May Gil make as full a recovery as possible, hopefully a complete one. The situations do seem a bit more coherent. May God bless you as well, and the rest of your family, who have also been suffering from this medical emergency, even though it was not in their bodies. I get this message,
Yeah.
And so I read this while I'm sitting in ICU, where he had been for 9 days. And there's a nurse there, and there's wires and all kinds of machines hooked up to him and all that stuff, and the nurse is doing stuff, and numbers are going up, and things are beeping, so it doesn't sound good. And so I turned to the nurse, and I read this, because it was a lot of very medical terms that I could not understand. And I said, "My friend just did this." And the nurse says, "Well, somebody must have done something, because I've been working all morning trying to get these numbers, and it just dropped like that." So at 12:47 a.m., I said, "George, you are awesome." The nurse was in, and I read what you did, and he understood it all and said, "Something is working." He said his heart was tachycardic, and now it is within the normal range. Keep doing, and so I write to him, "Keep doing what you are doing, and I want to connect with you when all this is over." And I said, "May I share this?" Because I said, I want everybody else out there who's going through something, and I also want to support him in the wonderful work that he's doing, to know that, hey, there's stuff that may help you that you don't know about that could be very, very healing. Now, I did not have a lot to lose, but then again, I was still very open-minded. Right. 30 years ago, my stepmom she was starting to have mental issues. Things like, did I kill anybody? Or voices are telling me I have to leave. And I found a homeopathic doctor who took a couple toenail. One doctor said, put her away immediately, forever. She's got, premature senility. Another doctor, homeopathic doctor, which I was just introduced to allopathic stuff, He said basically give her. He made up a remedy, gave her the remedy, told me to give her the remedy for 2 weeks, and give her calcium magnesium to rebuild the brain cells. And my stepmom in 2 weeks not only returned to her former health mental state, but was better than I'd ever known her as a kid. So that had opened the way. So when George says something about distant healing not even being there, my mind had already been open that there's a lot we don't know, and we're losing out on a lot of what God is giving us, the grace that God is giving us, this healing through individuals, by not being open to stuff we don't understand.
That's very powerful, Barbara. I appreciate that, and I wish we had more time, because the story, the part that there's a whole part of what you engaged in as well when he was home, how you took care of his health, how you took care of making sure that he wasn't on the wrong medication, wasn't on too much medication.
Oh, I took him off a lot of stuff. I read, I prayed. I mean, my body, I could feel it. And here's the most important thing. If people have somebody going through this, it was vigil. I literally was with him 23 hours a day for the first, 3 weeks. I only left to go get a shower, and only when somebody from the family was there to relieve me. But there were miracles that started from the moment it happened. My daughter was home when she never had normally been home. She had, and if she had not been home at that point when it burst, she wouldn't have gotten him to the hospital in time. Now, you see, the same hospital that some people don't like, my neighbor across the street years ago had driven himself. He'd had a heart attack. He drove himself to the hospital, and in that same hospital, they checked him in and told him to have a seat. They'd get to him, and he died in the waiting room. But when my husband and my daughter arrived, when my daughter arrived with my husband, the person who was checking in happened to be a Baha'i. And when they said Tally, they said, "Do you know Barbara Tally?" And she said, "Yes, that's my daughter, and that's my mom." She immediately got him through there. So when his blood pressure spiked, I think from 160 to 210, I guess something really broke. He was already being taken care of, because my daughter said that the nurse's eyes shot up like, oh, because it happened right then. But so there were so many miracles. But you got to live your life like a continuous prayer, and then when you need grace, it's already there. Some people wait to pray till something's wrong. You got to stay, as my sister say, stay prayed up.
Yeah, I know that's right.
So all of those things, yes, you got to watch it, you got to be there. And here's the thing: I knew his brain was going through some crazy stuff, because now he doesn't know what's. In fact, right now he still doesn't even remember those first 2 weeks at all. I remember it, but what I did know is that I didn't. While his brain was so confused about what was going, I didn't want him to wake up for 1 second and wonder where he was and what was going on. When he would wake up groggy from his sleep, he would see somebody. He would see me most of the time, or he would see some of the family members, and he would just go on back to sleep. Because think of the work that his brain would have to do to figure out, where am I? And then he'd be looking around, where am I? What's this? And he would get stressed and worried, and he didn't have to worry about that. Plus, the world was praying for him, and George was working on him.
Yeah, and let's. I'm going to have to get George on the line here, but
yes, you do, because Barbara can run her mouth.
But it's a powerful story. This obviously is an important part of the story, and I know you've got a lot of things on your plate and other things you have to do. But thanks for taking this time for sharing this story, and you'll get.
Let me just say one final thing. Mm-hmm. The stroke by March. In March, that 6.67 centimeter had gone down to 0.5 millimeters. And fast, and go ahead and go back, do what you need to do. He still has some eyesight stuff that they say is permanent. I don't believe it. I mean, I see him seeing, have full sight again. So, I mean, as you have faith, so shall your powers and blessings be. This is a balance.
George may be trying to call in right now.
There you go. So I will tune out and call that other number so I can just listen in to the rest of it while I run.
Yeah. Thank you, Barbara.
You're welcome.
I'm here by myself, so I got to figure out how to do this phone. So let's. I think he's trying to call in. So.
Okay. Well, let me hang up then.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello.
You can't call it one phone call.
No, she's off. Remember I said one call after the other.
Yes.
She hung up. He's trying to call in.
We heard a beeping outside, but we weren't sure if he was still on the call.
I know. He's trying to call in. George, if you're there, call in one more time. And we're going to hear what you have to say. Hopefully you're there, and hopefully you can call.
Continue on.
Okay, so you heard Barbara's story, and you heard the story of her husband Gil, and that's really just part of the story. But when George calls in, he'll share how he kicked in and really kind of the details of his healing practice. It's something I hadn't heard about before, but I think you'll find it interesting. You could tell even from what Barbara said that he had done some things to help the healing of Gil even before he had talked to her. And apparently they had contact online, but they had actually never met before, but they had communicated before. So he says a call is being forwarded to a mailbox.
Make sure it's on the roll.
So we'll get him to try again.
Make sure you got it dialed.
Okay, so we'll try again. Okay, George, are you there?
Yes, Todd, I'm here.
Welcome.
Glad that worked.
No, just a few technical difficulties, but we're good to go. Good to have you on.
Great. Good to be on.
And you heard this is Dr. George Lord. You live in Athens?
I do, Athens, Georgia. Hi,
Athens, Georgia. So, George, I want you to just share just a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, kind of where you're born and raised, and then we'll just go into this, because Barbara just shared, and I hope you were able to
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it certainly brought me back.
a lot of memories.
Yes, indeed. Boy, that was intense. Yeah, so I was born in New Haven, Connecticut, and let me just... Okay, I see you now. I think we're on time delay here. I'm going to turn the volume down on my iPad. We're all sort of having to worship the technology gods here. Yeah, so... Yeah, but certainly, but... Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, my voice came up there, and it was what I said a few seconds ago. Alrighty, yes, I was born in New Haven, Connecticut, and went to boarding school in Connecticut. I went to Washington University in St. Louis, majored in French. While I was in St. Louis, I got interested in chiropractic and various things like, well, for a while I had a vegetarian restaurant, and it was actually there at the vegetarian restaurant that I really found out about the Baha'i faith. That's a different conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But I decided I wanted to be a chiropractor, and through God's various workings and stuff, I ended up in Marietta, Georgia, and that's where I went to chiropractic college. And then what else would you like to know? I went pioneering to Haiti for a while, moved back to New England for a while.
And I wanted you to know whatever you wanted people to know about you. Just to share a little bit about your background, where you're from, your educational background, which is good.
Yeah. And by the way, I loved what Barbara said about staying prayed up. That's absolutely essential.
Yeah, it is absolutely essential. It's a foundation.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
Before,
go ahead.
Before I get into talking to you about Barbara and her situation and with Gil and your role in that, one of the questions I ask every guest has to do with the theme of the show. See the heaven in every black face. And so, just from your perspective, if you were doing that, if you were looking to or expecting to see the heaven in every black face, what would you be looking for? What is it you would be seeing? Or what is it that you do see?
That's a really interesting question. I guess the way that I tend to see people is, well, here's what I do when I'm working on somebody. I usually, a lot of the time when I'm working on people, I have my eyes closed. And I feel like what I'm interested in seeing is mostly stuff that you can't see physically.
Okay.
And so I don't know if I'm picking up on people's hearts or something else, but to me that's something like that is very important. And so I guess, well, between being a Baha'i and having various kinds of training from people who were very knowledgeable about their field, but also were not materialistic. In other words, they were very interested in the emotional, energetic aspect of things. That sort of helped me to tune in that kind of way. Plus, I have an autistic daughter, and I tried to figure out, what it is that I can do that might help her. I was taking a course about the brain one time, and the instructor, Bruno Cicli, whose book on easy for me to say, on lymphology, I edited several years ago. Anyway, he was talking about an aspect of the brain, some motion of fluid in the two top ventricles in the brain, they're called. And I thought, well, I wonder if I can sort of tune into Solange, who is several states away, and just see if I can get a sense of whether those ventricles are working right on her. And so, she's my daughter. I love her, right? So it was pretty easy for me to imagine that I kind of had my hands on her head. And indeed, I felt a difference between what my hands were doing. And I did a little bit of work, and it felt like what my hands were feeling had changed. So anyway, I just have given myself permission to kind of feel what I feel, and see what I see. When I see, and by the way, my daughter, as you know, is she's actually biracial in addition to being autistic. Right. So seeing the heaven in every black face, of course. Well, for me, I guess I by now I might be a little bit sort of programmed that way, so that here is, I don't know, maybe it's reverse prejudice, I don't know, but here's a black person, and I really would like to connect with this person. I really want to affirm, their sort of spiritual nature to myself and so forth. And I don't know. Can I tune into what's going on? Is there some way that I can be of service? Can I just make their day a little bit easier?
Well, that's a good.
I don't know if
no, there's not an answer. It's the answer that comes to your heart and to your head. That's always what I want to hear from everybody. It's to me.
Yeah.
To me, it's about getting that theme out there of seeing the heaven in every black face.
Yeah.
To change the image, and so I always want to know what people have to say about this. So before we get into talking about Gil and Barbara and the specifics of that, just so people have some kind of an idea, even before going into that, I was looking on your website, and I saw this concept. It was called Body Talk, and then I also saw, again, that's Body Talk, and I also saw a quote on there, and it was from the Baha'i Scriptures, and it said, "Consider how these diverse parts and members of the human body are closely connected and harmoniously united one with the other. Every part is the essential requisite of all the other parts and has a function by itself. It is the mind that is the all-unifying agency that so unites all the component parts one with the other that each discharges its specific function in perfect order, and thereby cooperation and reaction are made possible. All parts function under certain laws that are essential to existence." So I read that quote on your site, and then I read something else on your site that said that Body Talk technique provides insights to the areas of your body that need attention. What might seem like an obvious problem to you is not necessarily the one your body wants to address first. And so with that by way of introduction, can you share briefly with the audience, what is Body Talk?
Oh boy. In my own defense, I'll say that first of all, that the founder of Body Talk, who's a brilliant Australian chiropractor named John Beltime, he struggles with this question himself. I once heard that he told someone that Body Talk was acupuncture without the needles. Well, if I said that in his hearing, he'd probably slap me or something. But what I came up with in thinking of how to explain Body Talk is that it's software for the brain. So sometimes, if your computer isn't working right, if you download the right kind of software, it can sort of go through and find out where the where things aren't connecting and stuff like that, reconnect them, or can find viruses and get rid of them and so forth. Body Talk does something like that. Sort of, let's see, there's kind of a conversation that happens not only within my patient's body, or for that matter within my body, but between what's called the innate wisdom of their body and the innate wisdom of me. And innate is also a chiropractic idea. And by the way, I hope all your listeners understood every single word of that quotation from Abdu'l-Baha that you read. It's a wonderful quotation, but, if they could have that in front of them and read it a few times, that would be great. But, of course, they can go to my website. With Body Talk, one of the things that Innate will tell you is, okay, what is the top priority that I can help you work on today? Another Body Talker, something else might come up as a higher priority because they have more skills in another area. So anyway, what can I help with? And, another thing about Body Talk is, it brings in many, many, many different disciplines, and it's a lot of book learning as well as a lot of developing your own intuition. So it's very left brain and it's very right brain. Where was I going to go with this? One of the things about it is, all right, you have all these tools, and someone said, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Right.
If all you have is an adjustment, everything looks like a subluxated vertebra. Well, yes, those are big issues, but there are many other things that can go on in someone's body. So with Body Talk, you have to, we have this approach because maybe this is going on. We have this approach because maybe this is going on. We have and maybe all these several things need to be addressed all at once with all these several techniques. And Body Talk lets you do that too. It's kind of like, you probably, I'm sure you do remember the day, because we're not so different in age, where computers were really slow and you actually had to put in a tape. You remember that?
Oh,
the tape had the media, and then the computer would have to, spool the tape to the right place, so it could execute those instructions. Then someone smart came along and said, well, why don't we make this a disc? 1 or 2 revolutions, and we can get right there instead of waiting several minutes, So Body Talk is a little bit like going from that tape to going to a disc that can be accessed really quickly. So it's a great conceptual step forward. Now, I use a lot of other things, too, because for me they work really well, and I think they're cool, and I like doing them, but they fit very well together with Body Talk.
Okay, so and when you do the kind of healing work that you do, and Barbara explained that you had done some things,
right?
Really, from Athens, Georgia. I guess that's where you were.
Yeah, that's right.
And you wrote her a letter or an email, and you explained what you did. So this sounds like it's some form of distance healing or distance connecting. Can you maybe, I think it'll help the listeners if you translate some of the things you're saying into maybe the situation of, and I know each situation is different, but let's talk about Barbara and Gil's situation and what you did there.
Well, first of all, one of my strongly held beliefs is that, for instance, prayer works. And you can pray for someone who's halfway around the world, just like she had people praying for Gil all over the world. It's not like only people in Maryland were saying effective prayers, So if prayer works, then energy, with the intention of helping somebody, that can affect people at whatever distance. So, and Body Talk, Reiki, other things like that, they can be done that way. So I just sort of said, okay, we're going to assume that either I can help or, I'm going to try to help, but it might not have an effect, which would be too bad, but it's not going to hurt him. But I'm going to assume that I may have some skills that can help him out here. So I'm thinking, okay, what do I know about brain bleeds? Actually, my mother died of one 2 years ago, but she was 92. It was a good time for her to have a major brain bleed. I also had a daughter who died very prematurely also of a brain bleed, but I hadn't really been thinking in either of these cases about what to do. It really, that was with my daughter. It was long, long, long before I had any clue about this. But anyway, so I was thinking, all right, so Gil had a brain bleed. So what goes on in a brain bleed? You've got an artery that was under too much pressure and it burst. They had all this blood that came out of the artery, not the vein, because veins aren't under that kind of pressure, out of the artery, and it sort of gushed into the substance of the brain. Well, that's not a good thing to have happen for reasons that Barbara said. The brain's enclosed in the cranium. So there's all this pressure, and that is not good for the brain. So, and the word extravasated, that just means the blood was outside of the vessels. It should have been in the vessels. So I'm just thinking, okay, we've got all this pressure. We need to ease off on the pressure. We don't want the blood to clot. And, blood doesn't necessarily clot at a particular rate. Some people's blood clots quickly, some of it clots slowly, or some others. And maybe, in any given individual, you can kind of talk to the process and say, all right, let's not be in such a hurry to clot, because actually that wouldn't be good for Gil right now. So let's leave the blood liquid. Meanwhile, there are other things that are going to be clearing out as much blood as possible. Is this the kind of thing you want me to be talking about, or should I be talking about something?
When you say let's leave the blood liquid, what, are you saying you kind of transferred that to him somehow, or you sent that energy to him, or what are you saying?
I sent the suggestion to the what do you call them anyway? To the elements in the blood that cause clotting.
Okay.
So I mean, does the blood know how to clot? Sure, but do these body parts have a kind of intelligence? I think they do. Do they have a kind of reason? I think they do. So if you explain things clearly and say, look, I know you know how to clot. It's just that wouldn't be a really good idea right now. Then they might actually respect that and say, oh, okay, this guy maybe has a clue about what he's doing. We're not going to clot yet. So I don't know, maybe. It seems to have worked out okay. What can I say?
No, but I think it's important. I mean, I think people, you're not wanting people to think that, this is just some kind of made-up thing. That's why I wanted to have Barbara tell her story, because the nurses actually confirmed that something different happened that they weren't able to do during the time you were doing what you were doing. And that's why I wanted you to explain what it was you were doing, so people would know that somehow there's an energetic connection that can take place, not just in minds, but somehow in the elements of the body, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it felt very immediate to me. I mean, energetically, I felt like I was right there. Or like Gil was right there in my living room. But energetically speaking, there was no distance. So I had this sort of energetic, sort of spiritual connection going on, and then I was also kind of consulting my textbooks in my brain, and saying, okay, what's going on here? We need to, do more of this. We need to do less of that.
So there's a passage you have on your website that says this is from Matthew. It says, "Verily I say unto you, if you have faith as a grain of a mustard seed, you shall say unto this mountain, remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible unto you." And then there's another one from the Baha'i scriptures that says, "As your faith is, so shall your powers and blessings be." So you're really talking about exchange of energy, because and some people's belief, some people's theory, some people's thinking, everything is energy.
Right.
And so
that's my belief too.
Okay, so somehow you were able, through that faith, through that conviction, to translate a level of energy and information to the blood, to the elements that you were trying to, I guess, stop from clotting, right? Or you wanted them to clot?
Yeah. I mean, no, I didn't want it to clot that,
okay.
But I did. Well, I wanted it to clot in one specific small area, and that was the wall of the artery. because I wanted that to heal up. But the
And
blood that had leaked out, you know, so it got very specific. You know, I want that wall of the artery to heal. You know, I want these other processes to carry off as much of this blood as possible. I want the cranium to expand a little, you know, to reduce the pressure in there. But yeah, actually those things aren't on my website. I just thought of them yesterday when I was talking to you about the importance of faith and its power, you know, in being doing effective healing work of the sort that I do.
Right.
You know, if I'm always sort of saying, oh, gee, I don't know if this is going to work. No, I don't know if it's going to work. But if I keep saying that to myself, it's not going to work probably.
Well, exactly.
So just sort of, yeah. So just sort of say, you know, all I know is what I think I can do. I'm going to try and do what I think I can do. And God willing, that'll be enough. And he'll make up for the deficiencies.
Well, and I know some people hearing this are probably, you know, wondering, you know, really, does this really work? And so I went on your website, and I tried to, because, you know, everybody listening is not going to understand perhaps the scientific aspect of it, or even the energetic aspect of it. But I went on your website and I was looking at some of these testimonials, and I'm hoping maybe you'll share a couple stories maybe of people you've helped. But one of the ones I read, it said, I've been dealing with this lower back pain for the last 3 years, having tried at least 6 different massage therapists to alleviate the pain. About a year ago, I started having pain in my hips, particularly the left, which then progressed into sciatica about 4 months ago. I was seeking any kind of treatment that would help me maintain a pain-free lifestyle. My massage sessions worked for 4 to 5 days, but then the pain would return. And then this person goes on to say, upon receiving my first body talk session, I was convinced this treatment would work. My body was able to release what turned out to be years of tension and toxins that had built up for a variety of reasons. After my second session, this person said I no longer had hip pain, and after the third, the back pain completely released. I've been approximately a month now pain-free and living a much more relaxed and healthy lifestyle. I feel I've experienced an internal makeover and can honestly say that finally I feel centered. I feel like my body is saying thank you so much for finally listening to me. Now that's a pretty powerful testimonial. So how did that work? How did you
my Lord,
treat that person? How did you can you give some idea to what you did with this person?
I wish I could. I'm sorry to say, all the tests, as I mentioned to you on the phone, I guess, yesterday, I recently have redone my website, but the testimonials have stubbornly remained the same as have been there for years and years. So I don't remember specifically what I did for that particular patient. But, and I'm sure I did a combination of body talk and other things that I've learned how to do. But, so I honestly don't remember, what were the key things to that treatment. I'm pretty certain that if they came in for 3 treatments, the treatments were almost totally different, one from the next, because that's typical of the way I treat, because, I'm not interested in sort of pounding on the same vertebra time after time. Right. And it seems like, if I feel like if I do the job correctly on this, for this body part, or if I successfully clear out this energy that isn't helping them, or this emotion that isn't helping them, that shouldn't come back. So next time, let's work on something else. And actually their body, well, either their body or my intuition or a combination thereof, will tell me, okay, this is what we should work on now. But fortunately, I don't have to think too hard about this because, although I do have to think about it some, and it does, it's fairly involving sort of energetically for me, but between my intuition and and things that I glean from asking questions of the person, or yes or no questions of their body, and by the way, I can ask those questions even if they're asleep, then I say, okay, all right, well, it seems like you've got this emotion that's stuck here in your elbow or something, or your knee or your low back, and oh man, that goes back to when you were 3, And it seems like,
Okay, so how would you know it goes back to when they're 3? How would you sense that?
well, used to be, I would have said, I would have gone through this sort of painstaking process. Say, okay, is this an emotion? Yes. Where is it? Does it need to be cleared? Yes. Where is it? Center line, right, left, above or below the diaphragm, so on and so on. And you can sort of eventually get to where that is. And do I need to know how long this goes back to? Yes. Well, it's, how old are you? 50. Okay. 0 to 10. Yes. And then eventually get to, age 3. But one of the great things about Dr. Veltheim is that he sort of says, all right, you know how to do all that. Now I want you to do it quicker. I want you to use your intuition. Let yourself be inspired. So all of a sudden, I said, well, thank you, Dr. Veltheim. And so when I tune in, I might get, okay, emotion, L4, Okay, what kind of emotion? All right, and I just checked with the body and said, pull on the person's arm a little bit. Is this right? Is this priority? Say, yeah, it's right. Yeah, it's priority. And does this go back to age 3? Because I might get that specific intuition. Yeah, that's right. Or it might say, no, try again. Or, you're really cold today. You need to go and use the chart. But oftentimes it's a highly intuitive thing, and needless to say, that saves a lot of time.
Well, that's what I'm hearing, and how do you develop that? I mean, so you have actual chiropractic training, which you made clear, and other kind of training. You have some things here on your website that talk about visceral manipulation, lymph drainage therapy, craniosacral therapy. I'm guessing these are all kinds of tools that you have to.
Yes.
But all of them seem to be tied to somehow this intuitive ability to connect with what is going on with the person, and then and so how does one train in such a way that they feel like they can trust it and a patient can trust it, that kind of intuition?
Yeah. Well, I guess, ultimately with the patients, they have to get a sense for themselves of whether I'm the kind of person that they're going to at least give a chance to. Mm-hmm. And then they're going to, I say, I really would like you to give this approach at least three tries, And then if you're no better after 3 sessions, then you probably should be seeing somebody else. But, give it 3 tries. But usually people will see some kind of change after 1 or 2. Mm-hmm. But let's see. I think I lost part of the thread of what you were asking. I think, not everybody has the same aptitude. Mm-hmm. Different people have different aptitudes for different things. Right. They can all be developed, but some people, like I also happen to have a strong aptitude for language. I'm really interested in languages. Mm-hmm. If you tell me a word in Chinese, I'll probably be able to pronounce it pretty well. Most people probably won't. I don't know. It's just an aptitude. Right. This is another aptitude of mine, that I assume that I was born with. But you have to work with it. How do you work with it? Tell the truth. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to other people. Pray. Meditate. And have love for your patient and the parts of your patient that you might be trying to help with. Love revealeth with, what does he say? Love revealeth with unfading, limitless splendor, unfailing, limitless splendor, the mysteries hidden in the universe. That's from the Baha'i writings. Love revealeth with unfailing, limitless splendor, the mysteries hidden in the universe. Huh. You love these things, and they show you things. You love this process of helping people balance and heal, and things get shown to you. And then of course you have to pay attention, while they're being shown to you, because they may be, it may be something as insignificant seeming as a fly. Sort of, all of a sudden I'm seeing a fly in my mind's eye. all right, am I going to pay attention to that? I better. Because if I'm seeing it in my mind's eye, it isn't just a fly.
Well, so you said about Barbara's situation. You said
Right.
you're talking about the distance treatment, and
Yeah.
you said you said, and you wrote me this today actually. You said it was clearly an emergency, so we didn't want to waste time even trying to explain what to do. And then you said
Right.
in body talk, we always ask permission from our patient's body before proceeding.
Right.
And you said this is done with a sort of reverse muscle test on the arm. If it's a distance treatment, it actually works fine to pretend that you're able to feel resistance or not anyway. So anyway, you said it being an emergency and my work not being so easy to explain, I waded in. Then as things occurred to me, I reported on them. And so is that how you proceeded with working with Gil and Gil's situation?
Yeah.
So you just
Yeah, that's exactly what I did.
okay. So you just sensed what was going on. You didn't really get any kind of permission. You didn't sense any resistance.
Yeah. Oh, I did get permission, but I didn't say, Gil, may I work on you, or Barbara, may I work on Gil.
And
I
so
mean,
tell-
I didn't call her up. I said, okay, this being an emergency, I'm going to have to do the best I can, because I can't spend all my time trying to get permission and have him die.
So you just
so-
felt a sense of that permission. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's as if I was lying there at his bedside and getting this sort of muscle testing reaction from his arm, and as if it had said, yeah, go ahead. So I did my best to get permission to do it, and I felt like I had permission, and off I went.
So that's powerful because there's a level of integrity involved in this as well, because you had
Oh, yeah.
to intuit that permission and you felt like you got it, and what you're
Right.
doing is really sacred work, and so
Yeah.
you proceeded because there was an emergency. And I know Barbara, and even though I know everybody maybe won't fully understand exactly everything that you're saying because they probably haven't experienced it,
Yeah. Well, neither do I.
but Barbara, with everything that she went through and what she was going through in the hospital, what she saw of her husband, what she saw him going through, in her mind, she really attributes what you did to really helping save his life, if not saving his life, period. And so as these listeners are listening, and even if they don't necessarily understand all the details, it definitely merits, because when things are new sometimes and you haven't thought about them that way, you can think, oh man, how does that make sense? How could that possibly work? But yet at the same time, the same people that maybe would say that would say something to the effect of, I was just thinking about a person and they called me.
Right. Exactly. That's a great example.
And how many times does that sort of thing happen, where you're just feeling something from a person, you're feeling energy from a person, and
Yeah.
later on you talk to them and you found out they were going through something. And
Absolutely.
you were feeling it. So just for the listeners who may be skeptical, to understand that we all are energy and there is a connection, and people
Yeah.
can develop skills
Yeah.
in honing how they're connected, not just in understanding what somebody's thinking, but actually doing healing. One of the things that, and we're going to have to wind down here, Dr. Lord, but one of the things that I wanted to interview you for is because, in the world that we're living in right now, sometimes people don't support each other across race, class, and culture. And
Yeah.
I know, Barbara, I know you.
You didn't say that again.
Well, yeah, and you have like you said, you have a biracial situation. Your family and Barbara is African American, but what would have happened had we not been free of racial prejudice, racial suspicion, racial whatever? And you can just think of the difference of what can happen when a person doesn't have racial prejudice and does. You could have looked at that situation and saw her, and if you had prejudice running through your heart, you may just have passed it by. But because you don't have that running through your heart and brain, you actually were able to contribute to literally saving someone's life. And so, I don't want the listeners to miss that piece to what prejudice and racism can do to prevent humanity not only from developing, but literally it can be life and death.
Oh, yes, it often is.
It
Yeah.
often is. And we have to
Yeah,
wind
we were
down
going to
here.
talk about sickle cell too. it,
We
but
were, and we
that's
just
another time.
we kind of ran out of time. But I want to just
Yeah.
ask you, if somebody wants to contact you, how would they go about doing that?
Okay. My website is athensbodytalk.com, right? www.athensbodytalk.com, all one word. Or they can email me at athensbodytalk@gmail.com.
Okay.
So you sort of see a thread running through there, I think.
Yeah, and I encourage anybody who's interested to check out his website. This is fascinating to me. I think, for all those people who are not interested in necessarily taking a lot of drugs, because if nothing else, it's worth trying something different. And I know one of the things Barbara decided for her husband is that she wasn't going to fill him full of drugs, that she was going to at least be willing not only to try what Dr. Lord said, but also many other natural healing remedies. So thank you all for listening. Our time is up. Remember, transform yourselves, transform your communities. George, Dr. Lord, thank you for coming on, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Same to you.
And I hope people will go and look at some of the testimonials on your website, because they're pretty amazing.
Okay. Thanks, Todd. It's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.